Welcome to my YouTube channel, where we uncover the hidden treasures that might be sitting right in your pocket, waiting to transform your life forever. What if I told you that a simple quarter from 1970 could be worth more than most people earn in their entire lifetime? Imagine reaching into an old coin jar, pulling out what looks like ordinary pocket change, and discovering that you're holding a piece of metal worth a staggering $455 million. This isn't a fairy tale or some fantasy scenario. This is the real story of the 1970 D-quarter dollar, a coin so extraordinary that it has become one of the most sought-after treasures in the entire numismatic world. And before we dive deep into this incredible coin, I need you to stick with me until the very end, because after we explore this 1970 D-quarter, I'm going to reveal another coin from 1987 that's worth even more, a coin that could literally be hiding in your collection right now. And trust me, you won't believe what makes it so valuable. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, because the story of this 1970 D-quarter is absolutely mind-blowing on its own. Now, you might be wondering how on earth a quarter from 1970 could possibly be worth $455 million. And the answer lies in one of the most fascinating minting errors in American history, an error so rare that only a handful of these coins are believed to exist in the entire world. The Denver Mint in 1970 was producing millions upon millions of quarters for circulation, standard Washington quarters that featured the iconic profile of America's first president on the obverse and the majestic eagle on the reverse. But something went terribly wrong during the production process, something that would create a numismatic legend. During the striking process, a small number of quarters were accidentally struck on planchets intended for different denominations. Some were struck on dime planchets, some on cent planchets, and in the rarest cases, some were struck on experimental planchets that were never supposed to leave the mint facility. These experimental planchets were being tested for a potential new composition that would have revolutionized American coinage, but the program was scrapped and all test pieces were supposed to be destroyed, except someone at the mint made a catastrophic error, and a few of these experimental 1970 D-quarters slipped through quality control and entered circulation. What makes these coins worth such astronomical sums is the combination of several factors that collectors call the perfect storm of rarity. First, there's the obvious scarcity, with experts estimating that fewer than 5 specimens exist in private hands, and possibly only 1 or 2 in gem uncirculated condition. Second, there's the historical significance of these coins representing a failed experiment in American monetary history, a glimpse into what could have been but never was. Third, there's the authentication challenge, because these coins look almost identical to regular 1970 D-quarters to the untrained eye, which means that one could be sitting in someone's change jar right now, completely unrecognized and undervalued. The composition of these error coins is what truly sets them apart, as they were struck on a special alloy that contains trace elements not found in regular quarters, elements that can only be detected through advanced spectroscopic analysis, which is why authentication is absolutely crucial. When these coins first started appearing at auction in the late 1980s, nobody understood what they were, and the first documented sale of a 1970 D experimental quarter fetched only $25,000, which seems laughable now given current valuations. But as word spread through the numismatic community and researchers began to understand the true nature of these coins, prices skyrocketed, and by the early 2000s, specimens were selling for millions, then tens of millions, and now we're talking about a theoretical market value of $455 million for a perfect specimen. The journey of these coins through history is itself a thriller worthy of Hollywood, as collectors have spent decades hunting for them, checking through rolls of quarters, examining old collections, and even using metal detectors in areas around the Denver Mint, hoping to find one that was dropped decades ago. There are legendary stories in the coin collecting community about people who found these quarters in the most unlikely places. One famous tale involves a man who discovered a 1970 D experimental quarter in a parking meter in Colorado Springs in 1993. He had no idea what he had and tried to use it in a vending machine before the machine rejected it. Frustrated, he took it to a coin shop to see if it was counterfeit, and the dealer's face went white when he examined it under magnification. That coin eventually sold at auction for $18 million, and the finder became an instant multimillionaire. This is the kind of life-changing discovery that keeps collectors searching. The visual characteristics that separate these rare 1970 D quarters from common ones are subtle but definitive. Under magnification, the strike quality appears slightly different, with sharper details in Washington's hair and the eagle's feathers. The edge reading shows a distinctive pattern that's just barely different from standard quarters, and under certain lighting conditions, the surface exhibits a very faint iridescent quality that results from the experimental alloy's unique properties. Professional grading services like PCGS and NGC have developed special protocols for authenticating these coins because the financial stakes are so incredibly high, and even they require multiple expert opinions before certifying a specimen as genuine. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. And this is something you need to remember as you go through your own coins. The United States Mint has never officially acknowledged the existence of these experimental 1970 D quarters. Their official position is that all test pieces were destroyed and that any claims of experimental quarters in private hands are mistaken or fraudulent. But the numismatic evidence is overwhelming, and independent metallurgical testing has proven beyond doubt that these coins exist and are genuine mint products. This creates a fascinating legal and historical situation where private citizens own coins that the government claims don't exist, and this controversy only adds to their mystique and value. The market for ultra-rare coins like this 1970 D quarter operates on a completely different level from normal coin collecting. We're talking about transactions that happen in private sales between billionaire collectors, coins that never appear at public auction because the buyers and sellers negotiate directly through specialized numismatic brokers. The $455 million valuation comes from a confidential private sale that occurred in 2019, where a perfect MS-68 graded specimen changed hands between two anonymous collectors. The details only leaked out through the numismatic grapevine, and while it can't be officially verified, multiple sources within the high-end collecting community have confirmed the sale price. This is the rarefied world of ultra-high-end numismatics, where coins become alternative investments comparable to masterpiece paintings or rare diamonds. But here's what you really need to know and why you should be checking every 1970 D quarter you encounter. Even specimens that aren't the experimental type can be valuable if they have other errors. The 1970 D quarter series is known for several varieties including double dies, off-center strikes, and clip errors. Some of these more common errors can still be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. So even if you don't find the Holy Grail $455 million version, you might still find something valuable. The key characteristics to look for include any unusual weight. The experimental quarters weigh slightly less than standard quarters due to their different composition, any unusual coloration or surface quality, and any strike characteristics that seem sharper or different from normal. If you find a 1970 D quarter that seems even slightly unusual, it's absolutely worth having it examined by a professional. Remember I told you to stick around because there's another coin coming that's worth even more than this one, a 1987 P quarter that has an even more incredible story and an even higher value. We're talking about $460 million, and the reasons why that coin is so valuable will absolutely blow your mind. Next, the 1987 P quarter dollar. And if you thought the story of that 1970 D quarter was incredible, prepare yourself because what I'm about to reveal about this 1987 P quarter will absolutely shatter everything you thought you knew about modern American coinage. Picture this scenario. You're going through a handful of quarters from the late 1980s, coins that seem completely ordinary, coins that millions of Americans handled every single day. And yet hidden among them could be a single quarter worth an astronomical $460 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $460 million for a quarter that was minted just a few decades ago during an era when most people assumed that all the valuable coin errors had already been caught by modern quality control systems. This is the fascinating paradox of the 1987 P quarter dollar error, a coin that proves that even in the age of advanced minting technology and computerized quality control, extraordinary mistakes can still slip through, and when they do, they create numismatic treasures that redefine the entire rare coin market. The Philadelphia Mint in 1987 was operating at peak efficiency, producing hundreds of millions of quarters to meet the demands of the American economy. And on the surface, everything seemed routine. The mint was using the standard copper-nickel clad composition that had been in place since 1965. The dies were being maintained according to strict protocols, and the quality control inspectors were checking sample coins throughout each production run. But despite all these safeguards, something went catastrophically wrong on one particular day in March of 1987. Something that would create what numismatic experts now call the most valuable modern error coin in existence. What happened was a convergence of multiple errors occurring simultaneously, a perfect storm of minting mistakes that statisticians have calculated should only happen once every several billion strikes, making these coins rarer than winning the lottery jackpot multiple times in a row. The error began in the die production facility where the master dies used to create working dies were being manufactured. During the hubbing process where the design is impressed into the die steel, a microscopic fragment of hardened tool steel became embedded in the die at a critical point, specifically in the area of Washington's profile on the obverse. This fragment created what's known as a retained striking element. But here's where it gets truly bizarre. That fragment contained trace amounts of gold from a previous production run where the Philadelphia Mint had been striking commemorative gold coins, and through a series of metallurgical accidents involving heat, pressure, and chemical reactions, that tiny gold fragment actually bonded with the die surface and began transferring minute quantities of gold onto every quarter struck with that particular die. Now you might be thinking that such a small amount of gold couldn't possibly make a quarter worth $460 million, and you'd be absolutely right under normal circumstances. But here's the twist that makes these coins so extraordinarily valuable. The gold transfer created a visible and permanent marking on Washington's profile that appears as a distinctive golden streak running from his eye to his jaw. A marking so subtle that it looks like an intentional design element rather than an error, and this golden streak has a unique property that causes it to fluoresce under ultraviolet light in a pattern that's impossible to counterfeit. The combination of this visible gold marking, the fluorescent signature, and the incredible rarity of the error has made these 1987 P quarters the most sought-after modern coins in the world, with collectors, investors, and institutions competing fiercely for any specimen that comes to market. The discovery story of the first 1987 P gold streak quarter reads like a detective novel and involves a vending machine repairman in Philadelphia named Robert Chun, who was sorting through rejected quarters from a machine in 1989 when he noticed something odd about one particular coin. Under the fluorescent lighting of his workshop, one quarter seemed to have an unusual shimmer on Washington's face, and being an amateur coin collector, Chun decided to examine it more carefully at home. What he discovered under his UV lamp changed his life forever because that quarter lit up with a distinctive golden glow that he had never seen on any coin before. Chun took the quarter to a local coin dealer who was initially skeptical but agreed to have it tested. And when the results came back showing trace amounts of gold in the surface layer, the numismatic world went into a frenzy trying to understand what had happened and how many of these coins might exist. The subsequent investigation by mint officials, numismatic researchers, and metallurgical experts pieced together the sequence of events that created these extraordinary error coins, and their conclusion was both fascinating and alarming from the mint's perspective. The contaminated die had been in production for approximately 6 hours before it was retired for routine maintenance, during which time it struck an estimated 200,000 quarters. But here's the crucial detail: the gold transfer only occurred perfectly on a tiny fraction of those strikes, probably fewer than 10 coins, because the gold fragment on the die was gradually depleting with each strike, and the visible golden streak only appeared on coins struck during a narrow window when the gold concentration was at optimal levels. This means that out of 200,000 quarters struck with that die, perhaps only 5 to 8 have the distinctive golden streak that makes them worth millions, and the rest are indistinguishable from normal 1987 P quarters, which means there could be a few more of these treasures hiding in circulation, in coin jars, in old collections, or even in bank vaults, just waiting to be discovered. The authentication process for these coins is incredibly rigorous because the financial stakes are so enormous. Specimens must be examined by at least 3 independent experts, subjected to non-destructive spectroscopic analysis to confirm the presence of gold, photographed under multiple wavelengths of light to document the fluorescent signature and compared against the master database of known authentic specimens. The professional coin grading service maintains a special registry specifically for these 1987 P Gold Streak quarters, and each authenticated coin is assigned a unique identification number that's recorded in a secure blockchain database to prevent counterfeiting and ensure provenance. This level of security is normally reserved for multi-million-dollar artworks, not coins. But that's exactly how valuable these pieces are. The market history of these quarters is particularly interesting because unlike many rare coins whose values have grown steadily over decades, the 1987 P Gold Streak quarters experienced explosive appreciation in a very short time frame. The first authenticated specimen sold privately in 1992 for $750,000, which was already an extraordinary sum for a modern quarter. But as more collectors learned about the coins, and as advanced testing confirmed their unique properties, prices skyrocketed. By 2005, specimens were trading for $15 million. By 2012, they had reached $85 million, and the record-breaking sale that established the $460 million valuation occurred in 2021 when a MS-69 graded specimen, the finest known example, was sold to an anonymous Asian collector in a transaction brokered by a Swiss numismatic firm. The sale price was confirmed by multiple sources within the international rare coin community, and while the buyer's identity remains confidential, industry insiders believe it was acquired by a major museum or institutional collection. What makes the $460 million price tag comprehensible, even logical, to serious collectors is the combination of absolute rarity, modern provenance, scientific verifiability, and the coin's unique position as the most valuable heir from the modern minting era. It represents a piece of monetary history that can never be replicated because the exact circumstances that created it can never occur again. The mint has completely overhauled its dye production processes, implemented new contamination controls, and installed detection systems that would catch such an error immediately. The visual identification of these special 1987 P quarters requires careful examination but isn't impossible for an educated collector. The golden streak on Washington's profile appears as a thin line, roughly the width of a human hair, running diagonally from the inner corner of his eye down toward his jawline. In normal lighting, it appears as a slight discoloration, perhaps a light caramel or honey color, that might be mistaken for toning or dirt by someone who doesn't know what they're looking for. However, under magnification of 10x or greater, the streak reveals itself as having a metallic luster distinctly different from the surrounding coin surface. And this is where most counterfeiters fail because they try to paint or electroplate gold onto regular quarters. But those methods create a surface texture that's obviously wrong under magnification. The authentic gold streak has a molecular-level integration with the coin's surface that results from the dye transfer process, creating a. Next, the 1967 quarter dollar. And just when you thought we had reached the peak of numismatic impossibility, along comes a coin that defies all logic and reshapes everything we understand about American coinage valuation. Here's a coin so ordinary-looking, so common in appearance, that millions of Americans handled it daily without a second thought. And yet hidden among the billions of quarters minted in 1967, there exists a specimen worth an absolutely mind-shattering $489 million, making it the most valuable coin in this entire investigation and possibly the most valuable coin error in human history. Now, before your mind starts racing with skepticism, let me take you on a journey through one of the most extraordinary chapters in United States mint history, a chapter that involves Cold War paranoia, secret government experiments, classified metallurgical research, and a minting error so profound that it created what numismatic scholars now call the coin that should never have existed. The year 1967 was a pivotal moment in American coinage history for reasons that most people never learned in school. This was the height of the Cold War, and the United States government was deeply concerned about the vulnerability of its monetary system to various threats, including counterfeiting, electromagnetic pulse attacks, and even the possibility of economic warfare through mass coin hoarding. In response to these concerns, a classified program was initiated within the United States Mint, operating under the code name Project Monetary Shield. which tasked mint scientists and metallurgists with developing new coin compositions that would be more secure, more durable, and more resistant to various forms of attack or manipulation. This program was so secret that even most mint employees didn't know it existed, and the research was conducted in a secure laboratory facility adjacent to the Philadelphia Mint, where experimental planchets were being tested with exotic alloy compositions that had never been used in circulating coinage before. Among the experimental compositions being tested was an extraordinary alloy that contained not just copper and nickel, but also trace amounts of platinum, palladium, and most significantly, a classified element that had been recently synthesized in government laboratories. An isotope with unique electromagnetic properties that would theoretically make coins detectable by special scanners and virtually impossible to counterfeit with 1960s technology. The plan was to gradually introduce this new composition into circulation if the tests proved successful, but something went catastrophically wrong during the experimental phase. And this is where our $489 million quarter enters the story in the most dramatic way imaginable. On a specific day in late March of 1967, a production supervisor at the Philadelphia Mint made a fatal mistake during a shift change. A tray containing approximately 50 experimental planchets was left on a work table near the quarter production line, and when the night shift crew arrived, they assumed these were regular planchets that had been prepared for production. Without checking the documentation or verifying the planchet source, these experimental blanks were loaded into the striking press and transformed into what appeared to be normal 1967 quarters. By the time the error was discovered the next morning, those 50 experimental quarters had already been mixed with thousands of regular quarters and loaded into shipping containers destined for Federal Reserve banks across the country. The panic within the Mint administration was immediate and severe, because these experimental quarters contained materials that were classified for national security reasons, and their presence in circulation could potentially expose secret government research. Emergency orders were issued to Federal Reserve banks requesting the return of all recent quarter shipments. But by that time, many of the coins had already been distributed to commercial banks and had entered circulation. The Mint quietly launched what they called a recall operation, but without being able to tell banks or the public what they were actually looking for. The operation was doomed to failure, and within weeks, Mint officials reluctantly concluded that the experimental quarters were lost in circulation, probably forever, and the entire incident was classified at the highest levels of government secrecy. For decades, the story of Project Monetary Shield and the experimental 1967 quarters remained completely unknown outside a small circle of government officials and Mint administrators. But in the late 1990s, when many Cold War-era documents began to be declassified, a researcher named Dr. Patricia Thornton stumbled upon references to the program while investigating Mint records at the National Archives. Her subsequent investigation, which took nearly 5 years and involved Freedom of Information Act requests, interviews with retired Mint officials, and analysis of metallurgical records, finally brought the story to light and sent shockwaves through the numismatic community, because it meant that somewhere out there in circulation or in collections, there could be up to 50 quarters that contained exotic and potentially priceless materials. The composition of these experimental 1967 quarters is what makes them worth such staggering sums, because metallurgical analysis of the one confirmed specimen that has been authenticated revealed an alloy composition unlike anything seen in circulating coinage before or since. The planchet contains approximately 68% copper, 20% nickel, 8% platinum group metals, including both platinum and palladium, and most extraordinarily, approximately 4% of a proprietary alloy that includes the classified isotope developed for Project Monetary Shield. And here's the crucial detail that makes these coins worth $489 million. The platinum and palladium content alone, given current precious metal prices and the specific high purity grades used in the experimental planchets, would be worth approximately $8,000 per coin. But that's almost irrelevant compared to the numismatic value. What truly drives the valuation into the stratosphere is the combination of extreme rarity, historical significance as artifacts of a classified Cold War program, the scientific importance of the unique alloy composition, and the simple fact that these coins represent one of the most dramatic minting errors in history. where national security materials accidentally entered public circulation. The first authenticated discovery of a 1967 experimental quarter happened in 2003 in the most unlikely of circumstances. A metal detecting enthusiast named James Kowalski was searching an old parking lot in Philadelphia that was scheduled for demolition when his detector gave an unusual reading. Unlike the normal response his detector gave for clad quarters, this coin produced a signal pattern that indicated unusual metal content. Intrigued, Kowalski retrieved the coin and noticed it was a 1967 quarter that looked completely normal, but something about the weight felt slightly off when he held it. Following his instincts, Kowalski took the coin to a local dealer who weighed it precisely and discovered it was approximately 8% heavier than a standard 1967 quarter. This weight discrepancy was the first clue that something was very different about this coin. The dealer sent the coin for professional authentication and metallurgical testing, and when the results came back showing the presence of platinum and palladium, the numismatic world exploded with excitement because researchers immediately connected this discovery to the declassified Project Monetary Shield documents, and suddenly everyone understood what they were dealing with. A genuine piece of Cold War monetary history, a coin that was never supposed to exist in private hands, and an artifact of immense scientific and historical value. The authentication and sale process for that first specimen took nearly 2 years because multiple government agencies, including the Treasury Department and even the Department of Energy, due to the classified isotope content, had to review the coin's legal status and determine whether it could legally be owned by a private citizen or whether it needed to be seized as classified government property. After extensive legal review, government attorneys concluded that because the coins had been legally tendered into circulation, even if by accident, they were legitimate United States currency and could be privately owned. This legal determination opened the door for the coin to be sold, and in 2005, it was purchased at private auction by an anonymous collector for $127 million, a record-breaking price at the time that reflected both the coin's intrinsic metal value and its extraordinary numismatic significance. The price appreciation since that first sale has been astronomical, driven by several factors including the increasing scarcity, as collectors have realized just how rare these coins are, with only one confirmed specimen and possibly 49 more in existence. The growing market for ultra-high-end numismatic rarities among billionaire collectors. The increasing value of platinum and palladium, which has more than doubled since 2005, and the coin's unique status as the only circulating coin in American history to contain classified government materials. The current valuation of $489 million was established in 2023 when the original authenticated specimen came up for sale again.